It's an absolute honour to read this poem. Tom was a legend. He wrote this poem in 1990 at the City of Culture when he was part of the Workers' City campaign against some of the things that were happening in 1990, and specifically about Glasgow's logo that they used to celebrate the City of Culture, which was based on one of the Mr. Men. This is called Mr. Chesty Burns the Fried Bread. 1. It was a lovely sunny morning in Glasgow, and Mr. Chesty was hanging face down over the side of his bed. That nasty old night phlegm was draining to the top of his lungs. Poor Mr. Chesty. 2. Cough, cough, cough. At last, the first of the day arrived, and Mr. Chesty wrapped it in a nice fresh Kleenex. Mr. Chesty peeped. It was a Mr. Happy. Glasgow's miles better, chirped the little fellow. 3. Mr. Chesty found he could cough up Mr. Happy's whenever he wanted to, and every time Mr. Chesty coughed up a Mr. Happy, he wrapped it in a nice fresh Kleenex and put it in a floral bin at the side of the gas fire. 4. Soon the floral bin beside the gas fire was full of Mr. Happy's. Glasgow's miles better. Glasgow's miles better, sang the floral bin. Mr. Chesty sat listening to the floral bin. It was just like the Glasgow Orpheus Choir. 5. Can you sing The Garden Where the Praties Grow? Asked Mr. Chesty, but the floral bin did not know the words, so Mr. Chesty went to make his breakfast. 6. Mr. Chesty put his morning slice of bread in the frying pan with his morning slice of lawn. Then he spotted something outside in the garden. It was a giant inhaler. Mr. Chesty went outside to investigate. 7. The inhaler was almost as big as Mr. Chesty himself. Mr. Chesty read the label. Chesty's Magic Inhaler. Expires March 1995. 2 puffs anywhere in Glasgow, before or after meals. State destination clearly. 8. Mr. Chesty sat down on the magic inhaler. He pressed the top of the canister twice and held on tight. The Burrell collection, stated Mr. Chesty clearly. Puff, puff went the magic inhaler and rose into the air. 9. It was the most wonderful day of Mr. Chesty's life. He saw all of the Glasgow museums. He saw all of the galleries. He saw all the parks. He saw the cathedral. He saw Proven's lordship. He had lunch with the Lord Provost at the City Chambers. He heard a symphony concert by the Scottish National Orchestra. He joined in all of the coughing between the movements. 10. But of all the wonderful places that Mr. Chesty visited that day, his favourite was the Burrell collection in Pollok Park. Do you know who Sir William Burrell was? Can you guess why Mr. Chesty felt so proud? 11. Sir William Burrell was one of Glasgow's most generous and patriotic sons. He had helped his country by selling its ships during the First World War. Then he encouraged local business by spending all the money in Big Peter's Cash and Carry in Maryhill. 12. One of your no-nonsense Glasgow men, Sir William had liked nothing fancier on his floors than a ½ inch of reasonably dry sawdust. So he had hung all Big Peter's carpets and rugs on his wall. Sir William was one of us, mused Mr. Chesty proudly. 13. That day was the most marvellous day that the whole city of Glasgow ever saw or heard. For as Mr. Chesty flew back and forth over the city on his magic inhaler, the most marvellous thing began to happen. 14. In all the happy clinics, all the Mr. Happy clinics, people gathered at the windows, waving and tapping on the window panes with their little inhalers. Rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat. The sound gathered in unison all over the city. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. It was Morse code for Glasgow's miles better. Glasgow's miles better, tapped the happy inhalers. 15. At last, Mr. Chesty felt it was time to go home. Home, he stated clearly to the magic inhaler, pressing the top of the canister twice. But nothing happened. Home, magic inhaler, said Mr. Chesty a little louder. But all the metered doses had been used up, and the magic inhaler wasn't magic anymore, so Mr. Chesty would have to walk. 16. As Mr. Chesty walked home, it was late. It was dark and it began to rain. It was raining so hard it was like walking through a sea of boiling gobstoppers. I'd forgotten tomorrow was Fair Friday, sighed Mr. Chesty. 17. But that wasn't all Mr. Chesty had forgotten. For when he arrived home, he found that his slice of fried bread had been burnt to a frazzle, and the slice of lawn was like a wee black postage stamp. I'll try to scrape that in the morning, yawned Mr. Chesty, and went to his bed. 18. As Mr. Chesty climbed into his bed, he coughed up the last of the day. Mr. Chesty wrapped it in a nice fresh Kleenex and slipped it under his pillow. Is it fuck? Snapped the little fellow. Is it fuck? It was Mr. Pneumonia. But Mr. Chesty didn't hear Mr. Pneumonia's nasty bad language, for Mr. Chesty was fast asleep. 19. It was Mr. Chesty's lucky night. Already he was dreaming his favourite dream. In Mr. Chesty's favourite dream, he won a magnificent sports trophy. Can you guess what it was called? The Capstan Full-Strength Blow Football Silver Quaich. Happy Mr. Chesty. Glasgow's miles better.